This one is going to be very, very different. Welcome back to yet another Pokemon Solo Challenge run. This week we are taking a look at Weedle. I'm going to let you know immediately from the top that despite always having my rules in the description, which I still will for today, we are going to be changing the rules for this run because just based off of statistics, the move pool, everything, which I will dive into a little bit more in a moment, Weedle is an impossible challenge. Weedle is not capable of finishing the game, not for the same reasons that Caterpie and Metapod could not finish, but merely because Weedle does not have the amount of power, health, defense, really everything in order to keep up and maintain a run in which he can do enough damage with no items in battle. As you can see on the left, his stats are pretty rough. 20 HP, 10 attack, 9 defense, 11 speed, and 8 special. That's going to make going up against really any psychic Pokemon a major struggle in this game. It's almost an effectively one-hit KO without items, and it's going to be something that Weedle struggles with throughout this entire game. We are only a minute and a half into this, and I am already resetting. I know that's going to seem kind of surprising to people, but it is just because I need to. I don't 100% know why it got rid of my reset. I did have to go in and fix that in post afterwards. But basically, we need to make sure that we are getting as much experience in this game as possible at all times. So I reset twice here. We're 2 minutes in already. I should have been all the way up to Viridian and back by now. But of course, Weedle doesn't really have that ability. Sometimes with someone like Caterpie or whatever, I could just sort of let it go. I could kind of figure out how we could do something beyond that point, but also because I knew it was impossible. But I am setting out today to do something with this Pokemon and hopefully make something out of this really nothing Pokemon. Now, you're going to see that we're going to cut through a lot of the grinding throughout time here, and that is going to be a common theme of the struggle of Weedle. Especially later on in the game, we're going to have to get to these higher levels, and we're going to have to avoid taking any kind of blackout training. Like, I could have done that here, although I didn't even beat the Spearow. But the point, though, is that I could have that opportunity if I got there, but it's not enough, so we have to go back and train more and return once more at a much higher level and hopefully take out the Spearow. This time around, I am going to go for a struggle tactic, but the biggest concern here is that not only am I getting struggled, like recoil damage, but I am also getting a lot of chip damage from the enemy team, and I'm missing because of inaccuracy with Sand Attack. I know it's doable, so I do reset, and I'm going to go for it. I'm going to try one last time because I do believe that we can get through this fight at this level and get the experience that we need without doing blackout training and therefore losing any of the money that we have in our pocket. We're going to need items in this run. And perhaps I'm also wrong on the idea that even at 14 with struggle that I can make this work. So I'm going to have to walk away and come back once again. So let's talk about what makes this challenge so different, and let's talk about those items that I mentioned earlier. Because the beginning of this game is going to be a little bit of a slog with everything that's going on. We've got so much training and so much time on our hands that I think we've got enough time to sort of talk about the game plan and how Weedle can beat the game. It's not going to be easy. In fact, it's going to be quite difficult, and it's going to take a very, very long time. But it is doable. So for Weedle, again, like I said, without items, physically impossible. He just doesn't have any of the things that he needs to make it across the finish line. He doesn't even finish the gym challenge if there's no items. But if you can heal and if you can use any of the items, specifically the X items, Weedle can get some pretty big stat boosts, especially because in Gen 1 you have the glitch that continues to add on the extra badge boosts like we've seen in the past and we've talked about with setup moves. You can use the X attack, the X defend, X special, everything like that in a similar fashion. So I believe that by using these items and constantly boosting the stats and watching those numbers go up and up and up, that Weedle could potentially get through. And really, I should say I think. It is technically something that I know because I have watched other people do it. I was curious about if it was possible at all, so I did go and look up a few other people's challenges. I try not to ever look at things that I know I'm going to do anytime soon, just because I don't want to spoil it. I don't want to end up stealing someone else's idea. I'm sure a lot of us end up doing the basic exact same thing anyway, but it's always good to just sort of make sure that I'm making the decisions based on my choices versus other people's choices. That being said, Weedle I thought was going to be impossible, so I was thinking, okay, maybe I'll have to just sort of skip over this for a little bit, come back, and we'll do something kind of similar as we did with Caterpie, Metapod, and Butterfree, and we would just do that for Weedle, Kakuna, and Beedrill. But then I saw a few different people say, hey, if I break my rules, if I just say, okay, let's move the goalposts a little bit to showcase that Weedle could, in the right circumstance, and then here's how you do it, I was very interested in that. I was very intrigued. Now, one of my favorite creators that does this, Scott's Thoughts, who I have mentioned before, who has put out these resources that I'm using on screen already, his whole thing, he got to level 100 and then finished the game a little over 7 hours, closer to 7.5. He did say that he thought that if someone started using the items earlier than he did, that potentially they could come in at a much more reasonable time. I basically started using the items almost immediately after they become available. The biggest issue here today, and the reason why we're watching so much grinding, is because Weedle can't get access to these items until he hits Celadon City, and that is where the 4th badge is. So that is fairly far into the game, but also they're not exactly super expensive. But if you're going to need more than one of each in every battle, that cost really goes up. So there's a lot of strategy as well of deciding what fights can I get through without using the items, but, obviously then having to do 5, 10, 15 hit moves and getting through those fights and still getting the experience. There's a lot of things to consider with this level of grinding and this level of fighting, and just watching a Pokemon be more than double the level of another Pokemon and have it still do like maybe 1/10 of the HP of the Pokemon it's going up against. Oh boy, is it frustrating and disappointing, and we will see it time and time again in this video. Since we don't have access to these special items, and we're not really going to see them come into fruition until much later in the gameplay, we are definitely going to be skipping around a bunch and not obviously watching the grind as much as we are here while I'm explaining all of the setbacks of the game. But we are going to start jumping ahead and showing what those first few badges look like, how long it takes to grind to that level when you've only got a move that is 15 power, 22 because of stab, and how ineffective that is with such a weak Pokemon. At level 28, a little over 30 minutes later, and yes, there is a weird little jump cut because I did already wipe out once doing this fight, but since we're going to have a lot of those, let's not even dwell on that. We are going up against Brock again at level 28, and with a move that he is super resistant against. So Poison Sting is only a 5 power move. He also has 5 full heals for each of his Pokemon, so it's not even like I can really do that much poison damage to chip away at his team. So we're going to have to get lucky and hopefully inflict Poison Sting more than 5 times on each of these Pokemon. Now, in this particular run so far, Geodude went down much faster than I have in the very first run that I went. The big problem is, of course, Onix is going to continue to potentially use moves like Bind instead of Bide. I mean, I'd rather even take a Tackle than I would a Bind, since there's nothing that I can do. The only exception would be if I got a poison sting off on the exact same turn that he started bind, because then he couldn't use full heal until he was done with that move. Same with bide, really, because once he's committed to it, he's in it. But we are just going to continue to chip away and hope that we can string shot and wait out the bide. I watched him use bide on this last one, and I still used poison sting for one move. Didn't really make sense. I'm not really sure why I did it. I clearly saw that it was happening. But we are really getting into some dangerous territory here. We've got 5 moves here. And even with a critical hit, he still has a lot of health. So we are hoping that eventually he is going to run out of his full heals. And it looks like he does here, especially also on a bide, where I don't have to do any more damage. He's taking the poison damage each turn that he is waiting to use his move, and because of that, he faints, and we get our first badge at 1 hour and 14 minutes. Now, this is not the next badge, but this is the first time that we are going up against the Rocket Trio. I typically show them at least on the first, maybe the last one. I'll probably show them every time anyway, just because it's always fun to watch them get beat. But one of the big things here is that I am at level 30, kind of ready to take them on, but I think, of course, if I was half of this level, I would not be making it this far this quickly. One of the bigger struggles here is that they are fairly resistant. It's not super resistant, but they are resistant to the poison type moves that I have. But because I am bug, even though I am also poison, because I am a bug Pokemon, I do take a lot of damage from things like poison sting or smog. So they are super effective against me, and as you can see, it is down to the wire. I had 2 hits left. Really, I could only take 1 more, because if I took a second one, I'd be dead. So this is proof that the trio can in fact be a little bit of a threat at times. Now this doesn't have as large of a time skip here. I barely just get to level 33 before I decide to go up against the rival team. I do think he is doable. I do think he's going to be fairly easy after I've leveled up to this point. The biggest issue, of course, is still going to be the accuracy debuffs. That's going to be one of the biggest killers of Weedle, is he has to hit every time. He doesn't have enough PP, he doesn't have enough power, so every single move has to count. And the Gen 1 misses are already rough enough as it is, so we need to hit every time. And unfortunately, the inaccuracy here is going to cause a reset. Now, this is the second take of going up against Rival 2, and we are lucky to get through Spearow without having any kind of Leer or Growl, so our stats are perfect at the moment. Going up against Sandshrew, it's always a matter of time before he starts using Sand Attack. We got him pretty low before he starts hitting us with them a lot. When I say a lot, I do mean he is going to get all 6 possible accuracy debuffs off against Weedle. Not good. That is the kind of thing that should make any reasonable person say, okay, let's take the reset. We got to maybe level up one more time. Something that will make us go up against this Sandshrew a little bit more. However, every time he lowered my accuracy, he did boost my attack because of the badge glitch, which means that with 25% chance to hit, we do finally hit Rattata and Eevee and win. Now, we're going to take a big gamble here with our situation on moveset. We talked about Struggle in the past, about what kind of move it does and the fact that it does recoil damage. I did all the possible training up the Nugget Bridge and all the way to Bill and back, and I came back with 0 PP, and so I'm going up against Misty with all of that, and because I'm level 35, I have enough HP to make it through, and we get our second badge at 2 hours, 1 minute. And this tactic worked so well that I was able to cruise right through SS Anne, doing basically the same thing. I healed up once, used all of the moves that I possibly could against everyone on the boat, then used Struggle against Lieutenant Surge, and we get another badge. Easy peasy, mostly just because Surge is not very good. Scooting forward once again to the rock tunnel, this is going to be a constant issue both throughout this tunnel and really for the rest of the game. We've already seen it with people like Sandshrew or with Geodude, Onix, but when Pokemon resist our already weak move, it takes forever to take these Pokemon out. We are considerably higher leveled, and yet we're not really doing much damage at all. Granted, they did get some moves off to make us weaker, but it's still not doing enough. And then we end up having to go up against a Pokemon like Slowpoke. Absolutely dangerous. Do you see how much confusion is doing? This is going to be a problem for the rest of the run. Eventually we make it past him and all of the other Slowpoke users in the tunnel, but we get to what is probably the most dangerous Pokemon team here, which is the self-destructing hiker, 2 Geodudes and a Graveler, with a Weedle that, again, his move only does 5 power damage against. And of course, all of them have Rock Throw. That is super effective against us. This could be potentially a huge roadblock, something that could take us forever to get through. But as you'll see, so far, he's keeping up to his name and using self-destruct. Not a single rock thrown, and he uses the final self-destruct, and we make it through with 19 hit points. Whew. So 3 hours in, we finally make it all the way down to Lavender Town, cut across to Celadon City, and we are in the place that we need to be. I start to buy all of the X items. I do buy a bunch of dire hits, which is a mistake. I don't really need those. In fact, I want to never really use one. I will eventually end up selling those in order to buy more of these items, the ones that I actually need. The big things that I need are Guard Spec, which keeps all of our stats from being affected by the other team. Then X Attack, X Defend, and X Special. Those are the things that are going to boost everything that we need. Our speed is going to be decent enough already. It'll also get some collateral boosting from these other items, but there's also a finite amount that I can buy throughout this run. So I do have to be very careful about when I use them and how I use them. I don't use any going into this gym since they are all grass/grass poison types. I don't really need the extra boost here. I'm going to need them against the much more difficult gym leaders, but that's not saying that Erica is going to be a walk in the park. We are going to have to use some items up against her just because of the level difference, and we have to guarantee that we take out this Weepin' Bell, because if it can get off any kind of thing like Sunspore especially, it will cut our speed and it could be very, very dangerous. But luckily it's not so dangerous because the only Pokemon that can really end up wrapping us out of the entire fight is Tangela at the first part of this battle. So we are really boosting ourselves up here and trying to make sure that we have enough attack to get through. As you'll see, we're using a lot of items. I'm going to try not to 4 or even fully 6-piece setup against most people. Really, it's only ever going to be people like the Elite Four, some of the gym leaders, probably the rival, but rarely are you ever going to see just like a random trainer that's going to need a bunch of setup. Maybe if they're a psychic type, but again, we'll always cross that bridge when we get to it. For the time being, we are going into this fight fully set up, well, mostly set up rather, and it's enough to get us through. We fight, we win, and there it is. Weedle, paralyzed, still has 98 health. He is fine. 3 hours, 11 minutes in, we have the 4th badge, which means that now we can head over to the secret base for Team Rocket. We get through it fairly easily. The trio, I'm not going to show. They were easy this time around again. The poison moves were still dealing more damage than we want, but this is the real challenge. So far, Giovanni's first team has not caused any kind of problems for us, but this is going to be a time where they do. Starting off, Onix, the person that I need to set up against, has Rock Throw. Now, luckily, we were able to get off some of these early enough that the move isn't doing a crazy amount of damage, but it does have enough power to potentially be catastrophic for the rest of this run if I don't get these things set up. So we will, and then we're going to end up having to heal before we go up against anyone else. Now, one thing that I ended up discovering, and not until much later in the game, but sometimes the way that these items operate with one another is very weird because of the way that it gets reevaluated when other items are used. As you can see, I just set up ×6 for defense, but I ended up with a lower defense than I had a few minutes ago. So there's some really weird item interactions here, and sometimes I try and kind of flip them around, just trying to see if I can get the best possible interaction between all of them. But you have to be very careful about the order in which you do them, because it can basically undo some of the work that you're doing. And I think that has to be about the fact that we are using items instead of moves. Maybe even the moves do this as well, but we're usually not having multiple setup moves, right? The big difference here is that Weedle is using everything that he can get his little suction cups on and that he can throw at the enemy. Suction cups, is that how we would describe like the little types of feet that the little bug guys have? I really don't know. Either way, I am scooting forward once again. I'm gonna not show every single route and every single place that I train, just because this video is already going to be fairly long, I think, as it is, between like just the Elite Four and the final gym. But I did want to just sort of show that I am going into every possible place and exhausting all of the experience and money that is available to me. I go to every route, I fight every single trainer. That is also going to really add up on the time. As you can see, we're already past 3.5 hours, which is way longer than any of the other runs that we've done so far. And so here we are going up against the fake gym, or the dojo really, and we are choosing a Pokemon. I'm going to use one of these for strength instead of using one of the Pokemon that I already have that can learn it. I just figured, why not? We're doing this, we're getting the extra strength already, haha. And we're going to use this to use the strength HM later, just to sort of add on to the lore of this very long and intricate run. Next up, we have our rival that we fight specifically here at the Pokemon Tower. This is the 4th team for him. This is where we're going up against Fira, who should really kind of be a larger threat, but the only flying move that he has right now is Mirror Move, so that's all he's going to spam. Of course, Poison Sting is also effective against us, but right now we're so over-leveled, I don't really need to use any of the items. I maybe could have used something like an X accuracy. Probably the only time where I would really ever need that kind of item is in fights specifically against the Sandshrew that the rival has. But we're going in, we go through, look at that, we didn't even lose 50 health. That one was fine. That's probably one of the only times that this Pokemon has really felt competent in what it's doing. Now, I'm scooting forward. I've already defeated one of them. I'm not going to try and show you every time I have to go and hit an item 4, 5, 6 times, etc. But we had to use quite a few items to get through this tower, going up against all these channelers. There are many of them. They are all, it's funny, like I know I've heard some people mention things like Agatha Jr., but we constantly have to fight against these ghost types the entire time, and they are a menace. At level 57 versus 24, they are already difficult. Imagine how bad Agatha is going to end up being. So we take some time to fight every trainer along the way to Koga. And at 4 times speed, I don't know what I'm doing with these walls. I'm having a hard time, I'll admit. But I finally make it to Koga at level 67. That'll be 17 levels above his most powerful, but it's not really going to matter. This is going to showcase how even with using items and using a bunch of different ways that I can really boost myself, my special even properly put up quite a number of ways, Psychic has the ability to really run its way through my health. Especially if they hit a critical hit. It's going to ignore everything. It's going to ignore their power. It's going to ignore my defense, my whatever. It's just going to take me out. That's going to be one of the most frustrating things in this entire game, is the way that they calculate and run critical hits. It's going to be something that takes us out a number of times. including this time. We got that critical hit, and so we are therefore standing in front of Koga once again. So I try it once more, but even at this level and with a bunch of setup, it's not really going well. This time I don't even make it past his first Pokemon. So after I reset, I decide let's just move on to Silph Co. Let's make our way through every single rocket person. And I get it, sometimes the experience yields and everything like that might not really be worth it, but what is worth it is going through and going level by level and getting every last dollar that we can milk out of this place, because corporations are milking us dry to begin with, and I'm sure that's happening even in Pokemon. So we are going in there and we're going to take every item that we can, we're going to sell it for what we can, get as many X items as we can, and therefore get through. How can I get one more? Everything that we can. I don't have anything. You get the idea. The thing that is so interesting about this run to me is just look at how long it's taking us already. We're not even through Silph Co, but we're 5 hours in, and we just grind and we grind and we grind and we fight and we level up and we fight and we keep going. It's just battle after battle, Pokemon after Pokemon. And in this section, I'm almost never having to use items because it's not that hard. But then we get to the rival. I'm now level 72. That just feels ludicrous for this stage of the game. Level 72 and using items? Oh God, only Weedle, right? God, I hope it's only Weedle. Either way, we set up a bunch and then we finally can start making our moves on the 5th rival team here. We almost one-shot Ninetales. That's a little frustrating. It's like one more boost. We probably would have had him. Either way, it's fine. We go up against Cloyster, who's really more of a pain just because he's bulky and he has moves like Clamp. But we do one-shot Kadabra, probably the last time that kind of thing will ever happen against his Psychic Pokemon. Or, who knows? I'm hopeful that we don't have to deal with him every single time. That'd be great. Either way, we get through the rival on our first try. That is kind of rare, at least with something that's a little bit weaker and a little bit more difficult to work with. But we do in fact beat him, and so we get to move on to the Rocket Trio. Here they are now with obviously their fully evolved team. They've got some moves still that could do a little bit of damage, but once you get a setup in against them, they are not difficult at all. 200 HP does give me a little bit of tank ability, and then by boosting all my other stats, I got through their team with just a few hits each. Not bad. So therefore we are on to Giovanni. Now we are kind of lucking out here, right? He has elected to get rid of his Onix, which was a very difficult thing for us to go up against last time because it had Rock Throw. Now, having an Onix on the team still would kind of make him somewhat like a leveled up version of Brock, but also kind of super close to Bruno, who we go up against later on. So I do understand the need to cut the Onix. But when you cut the Onix from this team, you will find that there really is no major threat on this particular lineup for Weedle. Really, the big thing is just how much defense there is and like resistance to my moves, which is the main reason why we have to set up so much. Like, we're going to have to boost some of these stats in order to take larger chunks away from a Pokemon like Rhyhorn. As you can see, it still takes quite a while to take him down, and Nidoqueen is going to be very difficult. You see, she doesn't have anything super effective against me right now, but she is very much of a tank. She's very resistant to my moves, and she's just a fully evolved Pokemon. You know what I mean? So there's all these stats and all of these components that make her a Pokemon that's harder to take down, but we still do it anyway just because she doesn't really have anything that can be a threat to us, and therefore we get to leave Silph Co and head on to the next gym. At this point, I do think that we could potentially take on Koga, so let's test that theory out right now at level 73. One of the big things here about this gym is the fact that it has changed between red and blue and yellow. I think I've mentioned it in other videos, but just in case I haven't before, Koga is supposed to be a poison gym type, so he's supposed to have things like Buck and Grimer and Wheezing, Coughing, anything like that. But of course, in this one, he is sort of more of a anime-based team, so he has 3 Venonats and a Venomoth, so it's really a Psychic Bug gym. Psychic is a problem for Weedle, so we are going to have to set up, and we constantly set up, and we get in there, and I run the risk of not healing at all near the end here, but we make it through with 46 hit points, defeating Venomoth. Venomoth actually, I think, was easier than the Venonats, which is typically not the situation that most people face, but it was today. Next up, we're going to go to Cinnabar Island and skip as much of the overworld as possible because it's very difficult to look at, and go up against Blaine. This is an interesting choice on my part. I think at the end of the day, I figured that with a bunch of using items and healing up like you see here, I'm skipping to the end of that portion, but I think that once we set up, we can deal with him. His moves are very effective against me, and he is much better in yellow than he is in red versus blue. Sorry, that's the show. Red and blue. I might be the only Pokemon content creator that has that issue sometimes pop up, but I have that place and my friends there on the brain recently, so maybe it's just a little bit easier to make that mistake. But back to the fight, we are going up against the Rapidash here, and it is harder, but we do end up taking it down. Arcanine could be interesting. He goes for takedown instead of Fire Blast or even Flamethrower, and therefore we get off the second hit and we defeat him. After going through all the trainers in Sabrina's gym, we are going to go up against her at level 76. Now, here's one of the main reasons why not using items is a thing that I would do typically, right? By using Guard Spec in this gym, it means that you can go up against this Abra, and the Abra can do literally nothing to you. All it knows is Flash, and if it can't do anything to your stats, then it just continuously fails, and it gives you all the time in the world to do all of the setup that you could possibly want to do. So that's what I do here, is I just use every possible thing. I get up to 6 on 2 stats, I do 3 on the others. I feel as though that's going to be enough. I do forget that I'm going to level up and it's going to reset some stats, and it doesn't even matter. In the end, I actually think that I got this wrong. I thought Sabrina was going to be harder than Blaine, and in the end, she was extremely simple. Now, I know you're thinking that this is going to look like we are skipping over a bunch of stuff, but never fear. You're going to see part of the thing that we were talking earlier about critical hits, and how it is going to affect a large portion of how much work and time I have put into this game. So we get all the way through Giovanni's team the very first time at level 78, get a critical hit, die. Okay, I use a couple of my rare candies, try and get us to level 80 beforehand just to see if that helps. We get critical hit, and so Weedle goes down yet again. That long pause is definitely where I was losing my mind. It happens for yet a third time. This is not going well. I'm getting very nervous that this is going to be, even with items, a thing where it probably wouldn't end the run, but it could mean a lot of extra time, because it could mean that I would have to go out there and just grind way more levels in order to finish this fight out. But I'm going to give it one last try before we do that. So here you can see I have once again done that thing where we sped through all of the setup. That is a usage of 19 items there, and then a little bit of healing as well, just to make sure that we're good to go after we get through Doug Trio and Persian. Nidoqueen and Nidoking could really do some damage if they started using Earthquake, but for whatever reason, they really haven't been doing that. They've mostly been trying to go for Thunder, just because I honestly, I really don't know why, actually. Maybe it thinks that it could get off like a Paralyze or something. I don't know. They constantly miss. They don't really do anything. And we get to Rhydon. Now, this is the part that gets scary. He's obviously just spamming Rock Slide, and then he uses his patented Guard Spec, something that really won't affect him, at least when I'm using a Weedle. That's not really a challenge, I suppose, or a thing that he really needs to worry about. I heal one last time, and then I start going back to Poison Sting, hoping that he won't get a critical hit, and he does not. So we end at level 80 with most of our health. Granted, again, we were using items, so without items, we would have been crushed on the first Pokemon every time. Now we go on to Rival 6. We are going to have a little bit of a benefit here of the fact that Sandslash does not yet know Earthquake, Kadabra is not yet Alakazam, but we skip over, to be clear, over a minute of gameplay, which does mean about 4.5 minutes worth of content, like at regular game time. That's how much time doing this sort of setup takes. So I cannot imagine doing this at regular speed. Either way, once we are set up, we are able to do the clean sweep across his whole team. This is the last easy fight, so let's enjoy it. Now, I typically only pick up 10, maybe 11 out of the 12 possible rare candies that you can get in this game. Today, based on everything that we know about this Pokemon and about this run, I felt like it was necessary to make the extra trip all the way out to the power plant and pick up the last one. We're going to use almost all of them before we go into this fight, and I'm going to leave a couple of them for the champion and of course for Lance as well, just to make sure that we don't level up mid-fight. I hope I don't need it for Agatha. I hope I don't regret this. Regardless, we make the choice and we go in at 6 hours 40 minutes and level 90. We begin the Elite Four run. We are going to do a bunch of setup. We're going to get a little bit lucky just because of the fact that she will attack every now and then, but Dugong mostly just spams Rest because it sees that it's a psychic move and it tends to use that over and over and over again because it thinks that it'll be effective. The AI in this game is a little wonky. I think we all know that by now. So I've set up with special and with attack. I probably could have still done defense just to get the extra badge boosts in there, but I still felt fairly confident that I could get this done. We are going to probably have to heal up again here in just a second, just because I keep hitting myself, which is frustrating to say the least. But either way, again, we're using items, so it shouldn't be that big of a deal. We get a couple more hits from the ice or spike cannon. I keep thinking that it's ice, it's spike. And then we go in up against the Slowbro. Not that difficult. He didn't even get to set up really, so not bad. Jinx is a one hit. And Lapras gets poisoned and gets more than 50% of the damage. Blizzard misses, so therefore the next Poison Sting takes her out. With Lorelei complete, we go up to the next room to Bruno. Onix is a difficult Pokemon, yes, because it has things like Dig and Rock Slide. As you can see, Rock Slide is 225 power against me, since I am so weak against it. That is brutal. So of course we are getting very lucky that he is using X Defend and doing a few setup stuff of his own and missing some slams. Therefore, we have enough time to set up. Typically, I don't show all of this setup, but it gives me enough time to sort of talk us through this particular situation. Really, Fire Punch from Hitmonchan and the two Onix would cause problems for Weedle. Hitmonlee is not going to be that big of a deal. Machamp is not going to be that big of a deal. In fact, his moves overall probably do the least damage here of everyone. I guess Double Kick is pretty bogus for Hitmonlee, but really that Mega Kick is pretty insane. Strength is the strongest thing that he has for Machamp. So we are going to go in, and it does take us a while to whittle down this first Onix, but once he's done, we have gotten enough setup so that the Hitmonchan and the Hitmonlee are one hits, and because he has not yet done any setup on this Onix, we are so far 3 out of the 6 hits that it's going to take him down, and it's going to be 7. That is brutal, but actually, no, never mind. The poison last minute takes him out, and then we almost one-shot Machamp. That is crazy. This little bug is getting strong, man. Next up, we go up against Agatha. I did choose to use one of the 2 remaining rare candies. My mentality is that I do believe that we will not level up, at the very least, through all of Agatha's team if we start at a fresh level. I also don't know if we level up in the middle of the next trainer, in the middle of Lance, just because of the fact that we didn't even get to level 91 after the first two people. Now, granted, the experience pool could be a little bit larger because, they are tougher to beat, but I took the gamble, and I'm hoping that we are still not regretting the choice of the usage of our rare candies. Now, we're doing a lot of setup, and I'm showcasing a lot of it just because of the fact that it takes us forever, and Gengar is really going to be a pain in the butt, man. Like, I cannot describe to you how frustrating this is from start to finish, just because of the fact that I know that he's mostly doing little chip damage, but he keeps getting in like his little moves and his little things, and it's just it with the trade-ins and everything like that for putting in Golbat randomly, and then I kind of put a move out there just to sort of see if I can take it out before I finish setting it up, just because I know Wing Attack will be really dangerous. It's just kind of, I'm constantly being kept on my toes. Luckily, using Substitute does do so much damage to Gengar's health, so he then leaves, and so when he gets brought back in, he has like no health. This whole fight is very weird. She is trading people in and out, using like turns and moves in ways that I don't think I've ever seen her do in this entire game. I feel like her gameplay is usually a little bit more straightforward. I have seen, okay, and there's a critical hit. Okay, well, what I was saying was what we have seen in the past is her making some kind of crazy moves and usually just sort of using the Pokemon in a much more standard way for Agatha. Maybe you might see the first Gengar and the Golbat do the trade out. Maybe Haunter and Arbok might also trade out. But I don't think that I've ever seen her do the constant exchanging of which person is on the board, or in the field rather, at any given turn. It is mind-boggling just a little bit. Like, I don't really understand what the AI was doing here. I don't really understand these interactions. I don't know if it's because I'm level 91. I don't know if it's because there are technically some psychic moves in the pool later on, and there's also Wing Attack. I don't know the motivations, but either way, we do make it through the first two Pokemon on her team after getting most of the setup gone and done. Now, Glare and also these huge moves back to back really is difficult and frustrating to deal with. I sit here and I think about it for a little while. I'm thinking about the fact that I could do a few more setups to bring the speed up if I wanted to, but I had such a high speed and it got cut so far when I got paralyzed that there is an opportunity and a chance here where maybe if I keep myself paralyzed and I use Hyper Potion instead of the full restore, they can't really do too much to my speed, even though it still hits. Because I don't know, man. The way that the glitches work sometimes are very peculiar, so that when she does the move of Screech, it somehow also lowers my speed. I don't think I've ever seen or noticed that part of how the game interacts with itself, but either way, she sends out the last Gengar, which actually could do the most damage against us, I fully believe. And we beat both. Okay, a very strange fight to say the least, but we are on to the final person in the Elite Four, Lance. He's a Dragon type trainer, which typically I would say for Bug or Poison shouldn't necessarily seem that scary, but also consider the fact that Aerodactyl is also flying, Dragonite is also flying, technically Gyarados is also flying, but he doesn't know any flying type moves. He just has a lot of power with Hyper Beam and Hydro Pump. Those can do a lot of damage like that. I'm literally reading off his stats and like kind of getting ready to tell you everything that's going on, and he does it kind of instantly. Whew, okay, well, this could potentially be a longer fight than I was expecting, but that's okay. We're going to scoot right along to do more of the setup, He's got a few critical hits in there, so I'm skipping over a lot of the healing. That's most of what you've missed out on here in this little time jump of about a minute and 20 seconds, I think. But we finally get through the very first Pokemon, Gyarados. We don't even really do all of the setup. I eventually get not impatient, but almost kind of like nervous that the longer that I let him sit out, the more chances I have. Oh my God, that's such a huge, oh, that critical hit is hefty. Oh, and then of course he uses Fly, so this is dangerous territory to be in. Either way, he comes down, and luckily that time, because it's not a critical hit, it does not do that much damage. That is a critical hit and does do a lot of damage, but we are still going to go after it. He uses healing. I'm going to use healing. It's an even match, but I might be paralyzed. I still outspeed. He is poisoned, and so while it's not a lot of damage, the little chip damage that we get each turn does help out considering how weak each of my attacks really is. So Aerodactyl goes down. At this point, Dragonite could use Fire Blast and kill us, and although he does use it, it is not a critical hit, and therefore we tank it. This little bug is making it to the champion fight. We are going to use the last rare candy just to make sure that we do not level up in the middle of the next fight. Now, I was hoping to kind of do this at a much lower level, but I did get nervous still at the end of the day about not using the rare candies. Maybe I could have used them earlier to avoid some of the grinding. I don't know. I do think that I'm going to end this at a lower level than Scott did, and I used the items, and so therefore going up against the champion, I think I can actually clock in with a shorter time than him. Now, I think that at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter because, again, we're both throwing our rules out of the window in this challenge, and other people like J-Rose have also thrown out the rules that they would normally abide by, and you kind of have to when you're doing a weird little situation and challenge like a Weedle, getting through the entirety of this game. It's crazy. So looking at this though, right, I'm taking a lot of damage every time he's using mostly Slash, but Fury Swipes can also do a lot if he does 3 or more hits. The big thing for me here is that I struggle sometimes with figuring out some of the math in this whole situation, because there are times where I look at this and go, I have 999 defense. Like, why am I not tanking this in a much larger fashion? But at the end of the day, I know it's about ranges and, you know, how much the power of each move is and how that all interacts. Math is not my strongest suit, which is something that makes these challenges also, well, challenges. Because I look at a lot of these numbers and I go, yep, those sure are numbers. Those sure are stats. I sure do mostly understand this. I get the concept of it, but I don't always know how they fully interact, just because I don't really get how to calculate it. But that is more about a skill set versus the information. I think the information makes sense, but how to apply it is not what makes sense. But what does make sense is applying all of these move boosting hits, and oh my God, we one-shot the Alakazam because we are pretty much fully set up. We too hit the Exeggutor. I feel like that is unheard of. I think Cloyster should only be 2 hits if I can get a heal in and get this off. He did do a lot of damage up front. Okay, it's gonna be a 3 hit. That's unfortunate. But we do get through it. Ninetales comes out. Ninetales could be a big... Whoa, okay, huge hit. And then we go up to Jolteon and we beat him. Oh my God, I cannot believe some of those one hits. The fact that he is this stupid little bug, this dumb little yellow bug, this pointless little guy. In 6 hours, 55 minutes, and 18 seconds, he does it. With 6 setups of X attack, 5 of special and of defense each, and of course a guard spec. We get through this fight with a Weedle. 25 hours of game time. That shows you how many times the resets really changed the internal clock. But 6 hours, 55 minutes, 18 seconds, 31 resets, and level 92. That is... I mean, it just feels good, if I'm honest. It was so frustrating at so many points in this game. There were so many fights that took us way longer than I expected, so many that went faster than I expected. Like, honestly, that rival fight, I can't believe that that was once. That's crazy to me. I can't believe that we beat this game with this bug. I mean, I know it was possible, but just, man, it felt impossible at times. Some of them were just so difficult, but at the end of the day, we made it through level 92. Wild to see. All right, well, that is going to do it for us this week. I spent so much time doing this, and so I deserve a little treat and a little time to myself. And I will see you all next week for another solo challenge in Pokemon Yellow. Oh yeah, and I know we always say that we'll have to come back to some of these first runs again just to see if we can do better times. We will not be doing that for Weedle. This was a slog and it was hellish. I will never do Weedle ever again. Okay, got it? Thank you.